Good afternoon, everyone. It's now 2 p.m. and so we'll go ahead and get started. We're really happy that you're able to join us today. I'm Jennifer, I'm the middle school principal, and today we have with us Jean Tsai, our counselor. Jean's been working a lot with our middle school teachers and our middle school students in order to help them navigate the waters of virtual school and virtual learning. She's also been doing research into the different aspects of social emotional learning that we need to be aware of now, and also the aspects of social emotional learning that we would need to pay attention to regardless. Those also come into play in our advisory classes, and we wanted to make sure that we share with you the information that we've gathered in order to create the smooth school parent partnership that we are working on. I also wanted to let you know that there will be, as per your request, a little more chance for interaction today and in our upcoming sessions. We have more guests coming on to help us lead the sessions also, so stay tuned for the information about the upcoming Tuesday at 2 sessions. And without any further ado, I will pass it over to Miss Jean so that she can share her wisdom with all of us today. Thank you, Miss Jean.
Thank you. It's good to have you all see you guys, or at least see you guys that are here. Today I'm going to talk about social emotional learning, and what we'll talk about is what is social emotional learning and why we do it, and how do we support social emotional learning here at school, and then also at home, because we do need that partnership to keep it going. And I think, just as a note, if you think of any questions, please do use the chat and type them in the chat as you come up with questions, and I'm happy to answer them as we go or towards the end. So yeah, I would love it for it to be more interactive as much as possible. All right. So I like to begin just as like something to collect ourselves in the moment. This is something that we can do with kids too, but just if we can take a deep breath and collect our thoughts. And then just as we do that, just think of 1 or 2 words that are describing how you're feeling at the moment. It could be like a physical feeling, it could be emotion or mental experience. I see a few words. Great. And I noticed I was feeling like slightly nervous as I'm presenting, but then I see that there's some energy and curiosity and calmness to this. And yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for participating. So we'll start by talking a little bit about what is social emotional learning. And with that, I will show a quick video clip about that. Gives a good summary.
There's a lot of talk these days about SEL, social emotional learning. But what exactly is it? Social emotional learning is the process of learning social and emotional skills, and it's just as important as learning reading or math. This learning process is most effective when it begins early and continues through high school. Social emotional skills are essential for success in school, work, and life. With SEL, students learn to manage their own emotions and behaviors, have empathy and show care and concern for others, solve problems effectively, make responsible decisions, and maintain healthy relationships. Students learn to recognize what's happening inside them and to be aware of their emotions, which helps them deal with strong emotions and impulsive behaviors. It helps them stop, take a breath, and think about a situation before acting. Students learn to identify others' emotions and perspectives, which helps them empathize and show compassion, no matter who they are or what their background is. It's not difficult to imagine how this is important in the classroom and in life. Students learn to solve problems in peaceful ways and communicate assertively about what they need or want. This helps them get along with other students and get the help they need from adults.
So as I talked about, kind of the main 5 components of social emotional learning is self-awareness, like knowing your thoughts and feelings, like being able to identify them, and then self-management. So then once you know them, how to manage yourself, like how do you manage those emotions? So even in regular situations and when emotions get a little more intense. And then social awareness, being able to like empathize with others, like knowing how others are noticing other people's perspectives and their feelings, so that you can have those relationship skills to navigate conflicts and being able to deal with any sort of relationship conversations. And then also like being able to then make good decisions based on your own values. So, and this, as this little circle kind of talks about how it is, we do this in the classrooms and throughout schools, and then like with it, partnering it with this, you guys at home is really helpful as our students develop. All right. Next part is we're going to talk a little about why social emotional learning is important. Not just now, as I think it's particularly now with COVID and online virtual learning, it's extra important, but then even when things are relatively normal, it's still important as well. So I know, not sure if many of you may have heard this already with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He's a psychologist that kind of looked at what needs to be in place in order for us to reach what he says self-actualization. But basically, he starts with everybody needs to have their physiological needs met. So things like food, shelter, clothing, like our basic needs met. And then next piece is that feeling of safety, of that sense of I have a place that I belong to, or that I can feel secure in. And then there's also that love and belonging piece. So that kind of flows together with safety as well. You know, like my parents love me, I have friends that care about me, all those, that sense of security is there. Before they even get into here's part of self-esteem or confidence. So once they reach that esteem part is when they're more calm to be able to learn effectively. So basically, with Maslow's theories, he's saying that like students need to feel psychologically and physically safe in order to be effective learners. So we need to build those pieces before, prior to being able to teach them those like higher level thinking skills. So why is that important now? I mean, COVID-19 has threatened all of our safety. Just like our sense of safety has been threatened. There is a lot more social disconnection. I think just not being able to see friends and families face to face. And a lot more social isolation taking place. And so in order for us to create that optimal learning environment, students do need to feel safe. So, I mean, they might be feeling safe that they're not gonna be getting sick right away, but at the same time, it's also regulated, meaning that they can manage their emotions. Like if they feel anxious, being able to calm themselves down, and then also being able to connected socially with somebody, and whether that's through whether that's virtually or at least having that sense of social connection. I think oftentimes we want to ignore the emotional parts of our ourselves and just focus on like, hey, I gotta get these tests done. I need to learn all this stuff in schools that the teacher is teaching me. But then it's really hard to do that without attending to emotions first, because it helps prepare our brain for learning once we're able to manage those emotions. So let's look at a little bit about the brain. This is like a quick little talk about the brain. We have these three different parts of our brain. We have the cerebellum, which is the brainstem, and that part is, it kind of, basically manages like breathing, heartbeat, motor skills, things that are like what we do automatically. And then there's also the limbic system, which gets to the center part of the brain, and then where the emotions are and like memories are held, all those feelings that we have come from there. That's also where the fight or flight, when like we are startled or we're scared, all of a sudden that part gets lit up and that reacts. So then like that part, the limbic system can work together with the cerebral cortex, which is like the prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking, reasoning part of the brain. So all three of them work together, and in a typical day when we're calm, they're working together well. But when we are freaked out or something, or really stressed, it changes. So look at that part. So what we can sometimes we can go into survival mode when the thinking part of our brain kind of shuts off, goes offline, and then the limbic system takes over. So you can think of it as like one of the psychologists, Dr. Siegel, had come up with like looking at our brain as like a fist, and like the wrist part being like the brainstem, regulating our like breathing and like our motor skills and stuff like that to keep us alive. And then the thumb that's in there is like, that's the limbic system, amygdala, that's regulating our emotions. And then covering it is our thinking part of our brain, which is the cerebral cortex, that's helping us make having those reasoning skills and all of that. So when we get freaked out, or like sometimes if we don't have, it's too much, too intense, our prefrontal cortex will just what we call flip the lid, it'll just go away, and then we're reacting completely with our limbic system. And that sometimes needs to happen because we need to react quickly. Like if an animal is coming in to attack you, you need to be able to know and just run, and that's limbic system taking over. I think the hard part is some people, when the lower brain takes over and over again, we kind of stay in that mode, and we're not, so in that time, we're not able to learn very well. So if you see over here is that when we have a low level of emotion, so we're calm, we're relaxed, we're able to have that higher, the frontal cortex, be able to manage everything and help us think clearly. And our brain is online, or our like thinking brain is online. But then when the emotion is super high, it's not there. So when a student is feeling so like really angry, really sad, really nervous, it's really hard for them to focus. So I'm thinking about some kids who have really struggled with test taking because they're so nervous. We need to learn to teach them the skills to calm down in order to be able to have their thinking brain come back online. All right, so how do we support social emotional learning? Prior to doing that, let's do something that we will do in class. We want to take a brain break because I've talked at you for a little bit. We want to take a break to kind of prime our brain back to the moment again. So if you can just take a moment to think of a word, it could be any word that comes to your head. And if you can grab a piece of paper and a pencil or pen next to you. And then I want you to write that word 4 times with your dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, write it with your right hand, if left-handed, left hand. And then write it 4 times again with your other hand. So if you can all do that, and then once you're done, if you pop in the chat what that was like for you. Give you guys a little time. Some terrible writing, yeah. And then also thinking about what did you have to do in order to write with your non-dominant hand? What was that? Like, struggling, yeah. Yeah, the focus clearly. Yeah, I definitely had to focus so much harder when I was writing on with my non-dominant hand too. And it was hard to write correctly, yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for participating. Yeah, it's a lot of effort to put in. Yeah, so these are some things that we do in class too, like as we want to take a quick break, just to shift things up a little bit so that we can focus on something else, so that we can go back and focus more clearly on the topic. So let's get back to how are ways that we can support social emotional learning. Yeah. So I think one thing why we took a brain break really was that like breaks are important. And I think we often think we're just wasting time during breaks, but that's not true for our brains. Like the brain is still processing memories and making sense of what's happening. So I think it is really important. We do have those 15-minute breaks within like the synchronous learning times, but then also like there are times in mid-lesson it might be helpful and sometimes teachers might do a quick break as well, just to help us like make sense of what happened, what we just learned. And then like breaks can also reduce disruptive behavior. So like if it just takes people away from whatever behaviors they are engaging in that are maybe negative. It breaks, I think for us right now, like it does promote social skills. These are times when like students might be chatting with their friends, and like being able to like have those conversations is helpful. And then of course like exercise breaks definitely improves or even better, because it gives that like extra, like adding that physical component into it. Mary Helen Imordino Yang, she did the whole research study on breaks and what the brain looks like. So, I mean, and after all of that, with the research, she found that, this is one of the quotes that she had, that rest is indeed not idleness, nor is it a wasted opportunity for productivity. So we're not just like wasting time, it's just it actually helps us be more productive. Let's see. So a big part of also how we can support social emotional learning is we have to create that emotionally safe space. So like Maslow is what I talked about previously, those physiological safety needs need to be in place. So our emotions are a big part of that. And it will impact learning quite a bit. So, so I think big part of creating that safe space, emotionally safe space for students is, I mean, especially right now with virtual learning, is that workspace free from stress. So that workspace that's quiet, because I think even if like somebody's taking a phone call or another student's talking or somebody's talking near them, it could not just be a distraction, it also increases that stress level a little bit for this kid to try to focus on whatever they're doing in class, as well as like trying to block out conversation. So having that like dedicated workspace that is quiet and away from any of the other distractions is super important. If your kid is distracted with their technology, it would be really helpful for them to take away like phones or other things just at least during the work time. They can of course have it during breaks if they need it. And then I think predictable routines, like having a similar wake up and sleep time, also like, hey, dinner, lunch, those times are somewhat similar, and just knowing for a student to know what to expect is helpful and keep feeling safe. And you know, I think it's just accepting your child for who they are and building the strengths. So, you know, I think sometimes academics aren't always, like every child is unique in what they find easy or what they're good at. So like try to build on the strengths that they do have. So, you know, maybe they're not great in math, but like art is something that they excel at. So like try to build on those art strengths, like using art and encouraging them to use art in different ways. And then of course, like checking in with your child on like their feelings. I think being able to express those feelings about like, I am overwhelmed right now, or I had a great class, I loved learning about this. You know, I think asking them about their school and having them talk about it, talking about the classes and how they feel about it it's helpful in that creating that safe space. And then, I mean, they're observing how you're managing frustrations of all the things that are happening right now that's outside of your control with COVID, with, you know, working from home or maybe having to go out in the office when you don't feel safe. You know, how do you manage those frustrations? They're watching you, and you modeling effective ways of doing that is important. And then just like, you know, all the middle schoolers, I mean, we always talk about like, this is a time for students to learn from their mistakes. Like, well, we're going to make those mistakes and it's okay. And it's like, let's learn from them as well. So I think, but not fault somebody for just making a mistake once or twice even. Yeah. All right. So I think just ways that at home, creating that emotional support before. So I think the big thing is like we need to create that emotional support before we provide our learning support. It's more of, you know your family and your child the best. You know what excites them and what motivates them. So use those kind of things to help them get excited about school. Like I said before, like routine's important. I think just being in the space that you are in, like oftentimes you guys may be seeing each other a lot more than ever before. Having expectations that everybody follows, not just like, hey, you guys need to work during the day and do your homework at this time, but like, and then like parents are not following that at all, or these are phone times, but then parents aren't doing that. So I think just come up with some like mutual things that your whole family agrees to about things such as like technology use or like work times, those kind of things, and social times. I think this part is like work periods that are developmentally appropriate. So looking at like how much, so like we're in school right now, we have those synchronous times in classes that students are in, but then there are also asynchronous times where students are working on all their schoolwork. So this might be a time where like you don't, maybe not force your child to be working 3 hours straight, because it's not developmentally appropriate. So typical, like the range for for work periods is typically the student's age multiplied by, the range is between what's multiplied by 2 multiplied by 5. So say a student's 11 years old, so they can work anywhere from 22 minutes to 55 minutes. So like, I mean, the range is pretty big. And so like every child's slightly different, but I think that's just something to kind of keep in mind, not having an 11-year-old work consecutively for more than 55 minutes at most. And then if a child is really enjoying an activity, ask them about it, like, and really dive into that a little bit more. We talk about like, so we're looking at the bicycle is a way to look at like emotional support as well as like learning support, what the differences are. So like providing that emotional support is really like with that praise, that catching the child when they're about to, before they fall, you know, also like you can do this, you're doing a great job. Those kind of like verbal pieces for when we're teaching a child how to ride a bike, we provide that emotional support or as they learn. But then there's also that learning support where there might be like training wheels and things in place, and then like you kind of teaching them how to hold the handlebars, how to pedal, those kind of maybe holding on to the back seat to help them guide them. Those are the learning supports that teachers and parents are providing, but also like we need to also that equally important is that all those like being there when they're about to fall, or being able to encourage them as they go along. That helps them be able to learn how to ride a bike. I think also one thing that we want to keep in mind as we're providing all the support is like how to balance that independence. You know, like this is a time when middle school or entering adolescence is a time when like they're developing individual identities. They're learning the skills to be independent. They're creating that emotional independence from parents. They're building a more relationship with peers. So this is what's happening to them in their brains as well at this point. So that we also, we want to support that in their learning. So like what are ways, so we do want to provide those opportunities for independence as we are supporting them emotionally. So thinking about the bicycle, like we want to, as you're teaching your child how to ride a bike, starting with training wheels, you know, like maybe, but then like as they're better at that, you take those off. You might hold their seat or be really close guiding them, but then like you back off more and more. So we want to, like every child is of course different, and then we want to identify what are their stretch zones. We want safe stretch zones. We want them to be able to stretch, be able to develop ways to organize themselves, and see who they are as a learner, but they need that space to do that, but not too much space that they're left overwhelmed. But so it's like finding that sweet spot is always somewhat a trial and error that is important to try to find. And right now, I think what's most important for a middle schooler right now is learning how to learn. So like, I think these are like great conversations you can be having with a student. Their child is like, asking, as they're asking you a question about like a math problem and like what the answer is. So I think the big part is asking them how, like maybe you figure out the answer, but then teaching them how you got there and like what are the steps you took to problem solve yourself. Like that's what's important for them to see. Or like, you know, like as I think looking at virtual learning, they need to organize themselves a lot. So what are ways to how you organize, maybe and then talk to them about find out about how they're organizing, how are they keeping track of all of their schoolwork. How are they dealing with it when they have like a new assignment that pop up suddenly, you know, how do they adapt, you know, and how do they fit that stuff in? These are the skills that they're going to need as they go to university one day, you know, and become adults. So like we want to instill those pieces in them and as much as possible. And then having clear academic expectations. So I'm thinking about like, when are they allowed to have breaks, you know, like and like, what are they able to do? Like how much time are they supposed to spend on work, and what should they be doing during that time when they're working on school? Like, should they be playing video games during that time? And, you know, like setting those clear expectations of like when to do the various activities they want to do, like, and also when to get their work done. So like having those guidelines will help them know what your expectations are, and also create that independence for them to follow what your guidelines are and then get their work done on their own if they can. And then looking at what we're doing at school right now, we are ways that we are supporting social emotional learning. Like we are doing, like we did brain breaks. We do advisory lessons right now. Some of the topics that we've had this past month, like grade 8 is talking quite a bit extensively about strengths, like looking at each person's strengths, and sure, I think there's another Tuesday at 2 to talk about that in upcoming weeks as well. And then grades 6 and 7 are looking at like emotions, like different types of identifying their own emotions, and what are some, and like more difficult emotions to manage, like anxiety, and then what are some skills we can do, like what's this mindfulness to help us like calm our emotions down. We're talking about the pandemic throughout, because this is a big part of everybody's lives, and people have emotional reactions to it. So we want to talk about it. We want to allow that space for students to share, and also ways to like look at it from an academic point of view as well. And then we're also trying to create that social opportunities for students through group work in classes, whether it's like lunch bunches or other little groups that they can meet up with their friends and have different conversations. And also through advisory, and sometimes depending on the student, sometimes individually, we work with the student on building like their weekly schedule so that they can organize themselves, because that creating that structure is also a way to help them manage that anxiety. And here are just some examples of like things that happened in advisory. So these are some grade 6 examples. So they were exploring emotions and identifying ways to what all these words look like for each student. So these are 3 of the students that showed their emotional wheel, their wheel of emotions, and the pictures that they came up with for the emotions that they picked. And then we have grade 7, which they actually were talking about what it means to be a cross-culture kid or a third culture kid, which all of the students at AISD are, what either a cross-culture kid or a third culture kid, and just what that looks like, what that means, looking at like what's visible, like what we see as on the outside, but then what are the different cultural things that we don't necessarily know about a person, but by looking at them. And then they're looking at like what's the difference, sometimes what the home culture and school culture are somewhat different, and what that might look like between the two. And then grade 8, like we're talking about, they're looking at strengths, and like they've been telling stories about like a moment that they're proud of themselves for, and like what are some of the strengths they exhibited at this time. They took a survey of via character strengths. They took a survey that identifies their ranked all of their strengths, and these are just like some of the top 5 strengths of a few of the students. Like you see. So they're going to be exploring that a lot more, so to kind of understand themselves a lot more and be able to understand how they can utilize their strengths for every, like for their daily lives and for them as learners as well. Mm-hmm. All right, that's the end of what I have to share with you guys. I am happy to answer any questions. If you have questions that you want to pop in the chat, or if you want to turn on your video or unmute yourself to ask, I'm definitely happy to answer them as well.
I know last time when we met as Tuesday at Two Group, some of the questions also came up in the chat. And so that's another space in which you can ask questions. We're trying to make sure that we're responsive to the questions every time that we meet with parents. So chat is also an option.
Hi, good afternoon. I had a question.
Mhm.
The question is, when school began, we were told that the children would need to sit in an open space, and also my daughter argued that no, the teachers told me that, it has to be a quiet space. So it's a little contradictory because, the open space is usually not so quiet with, some of us being in the house and moving around. So children like their quiet space, which is their study desk. I prefer with the door open, but sometimes they tend to, shut the door. So do you have any advice, any suggestions on that?
I do suggest like a quiet space. I think you know your child the best as far as like, do they need that monitoring? I think but like having, if it's an open space and there are lots of walking around, that is definitely distracting. So yeah, quiet space with their door shut is good. But if you have a child that needs somebody to check in and make sure they're focused, that might need like, they might need their door open, or you might need to pop in more often, or have somebody pop in more often to check on them. Yeah.
No, it's teenagers get distracted very easily, that's all.
Yeah, so like creating that quiet space is probably better for them.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.